My name is Rhiannon Vance, and for a while, my life in Port Blossom was finally starting to feel like my own. After a few years in the service, you learn to appreciate four walls that don't move and a bed that you don't have to make with hospital corners every single morning. I was 25, working two jobs to make ends meet, one as a prep cook in a stuffy downtown restaurant and another waiting tables at a greasy spoon diner by the docks. The work was hard and the hours were long, but every paycheck felt like a small victory, another brick laid in the foundation of the life I was building for myself. My biggest prize was my duplex. It was a modest two-bedroom, two-bathroom place, but it was mine. All mine. The landlord was a sweet old woman named Mrs. Gable who lived on the other side of the wall. She was so hard of hearing you could have set off fireworks in her living room, and she would have just thought a truck backfired down the street. It was perfect. This little duplex was my sanctuary, a quiet harbor after the chaotic seas of my past, which included a string of chaotic share houses. I had done my time living with random people, navigating the endless drama of dirty dishes, unpaid bills, and personalities that clashed like cymbals. I was done with all that, or so I thought. One glorious Saturday, a rare day off, a couple of old friends came over to see my new place. They brought cheap beer and a friend of a friend named Leo. We sat in my small living room, and they all marveled at the sheer luxury of having a spare bedroom and, most impressively, my very own bathroom. During our conversation, Leo mentioned a problem at his share house. A roommate named Cassandra was being kicked out. This wasn't her first time being asked to leave a place. Apparently, it was a recurring theme in her life, maybe the 10th house in a year. I found it strange. Leo explained that she was actually a model tenant in most ways. She had a steady job, always paid her rent on time, and even chipped in for cleaning supplies without being asked. I could not figure out what the problem could possibly be. So why does everyone kick her out? I asked, genuinely confused. Leo shifted uncomfortably. Well, he said, lowering his voice, she's just not very considerate when she has company. I pressed him, and he finally admitted the issue was her intimate life. My first thought was that the guys in his house were just angry because she wouldn't get with any of them. It seemed like a classic case of petty resentment. Feeling a wave of misplaced sympathy, and maybe a little buzzed from the beer, I heard myself say the words I would come to regret. Well, she can move in here if she needs a place. I have a spare room. The very next morning, my doorbell rang at an hour that felt like the middle of the night. It was Cassandra. She was bright-eyed and eager, a stark contrast to my hungover, bleary-eyed state. I invited her in and we talked over coffee. I laid down my simple rules: pay your share of the rent and utilities on time, keep the common areas like the kitchen and living room clean, and absolutely no loud noises, especially loud romantic encounters, after 11 at night. She smiled and agreed to everything so enthusiastically, I felt a sense of relief. By that evening, she was all moved in. My sanctuary now had a second occupant. I should have asked more questions. I should have listened to that little warning bell in the back of my mind. My mistake. The first few days were fine, almost peaceful. But then came Wednesday night. I stumbled home from my restaurant job just after midnight, exhausted and smelling of garlic and old grease. One habit I had kept from my share house days was installing heavy-duty locks on my bedroom door, one on the outside and a deadbolt on the inside. It was a habit born from living in rough neighborhoods with questionable roommates. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and threw the deadbolt. After a quick shower, I collapsed into bed, dead to the world. Around 2 in the morning, I was ripped from my sleep by a sound I can only describe as a pair of large, distressed farm animals trying to communicate their deepest sorrows from the next room. It was a symphony of groans and shrieks that seemed to shake the very walls. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping it was a dream. It was not. It was Cassandra and her guest of the evening. I tried to be reasonable. I banged on the wall between our bedrooms. Noise only seemed to get louder, as if my banging was some kind of encouragement. I got out of bed, my heart pounding with irritation, and knocked on her door. "Cassandra, could you please keep it down?" I shouted. The noise paused for a second, followed by a giggle, and then it resumed, somehow with even more passion than before. Defeated and furious, I retreated to my room, stuffed a pillow over my head, and prayed for sleep that never came. The next morning, I confronted her. I tried to be calm and rational. "Cassandra," I started, "we need to talk about last night. You were really loud. I have to get up for work at 5:30 in the morning. I need my sleep." She looked horrified, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh my gosh, Rhiannon, I am so sorry. I had no idea. It will never ever happen again, I promise." She was so convincing, so seemingly full of remorse that I believed her. I thought the problem was solved. That night I went to bed hopeful. The next night was even worse. This time, it wasn't just two farm animals. It was an entire stampede. The headboard of her bed was banging against the wall in a frantic rhythm, and the sounds they were making were inhuman. My reasonable approach had failed. My anger was boiling over. I pounded on her door again, yelling for them to be quiet, but they completely ignored me. The next day at work, I was a zombie. I nearly sliced my finger off while chopping onions, and my boss yelled at me for mixing up two orders. I came home that evening filled with dread. My sanctuary had become a place of anxiety. I felt trapped in my own home. I started looking up eviction laws, realizing it would be a long, complicated process. I felt utterly powerless. I sat on my bed, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, dreading the inevitable midnight performance. I had made a terrible mistake, and I felt like my hard won peace was lost forever, all because I tried to do a good deed. That was my lowest point. I even considered giving up the duplex, my beautiful, quiet duplex, just to get away from her. Then came Friday night. I got home late, bone tired, and fell into bed. Sure enough, like clockwork, at 2:15 in the morning, the concert began. But this time, something inside me snapped. The exhaustion and frustration curdled into a cold, clear resolve. The army taught me many things, but one of the most useful was how to plan and execute a decisive action under pressure. In a single fluid motion, I was out of bed and heading for my ensuite bathroom. I kept a large 5-gallon bucket in there for my dirty chef's whites. I dumped the clothes into the bathtub and cranked the cold water tap, filling the bucket to the brim. The sound of the rushing water was drowned out by the escalating noises from Cassandra's room. It was truly unbelievable. Bucket in hand, water sloshing over the sides, I crept to her bedroom door. I did not knock. I did not hesitate. I turned the knob, flung the door open, and took in the scene. In the glow of her bedside lamp, I saw a skinny little guy going at it with the focus of a marathon runner, his back glistening with sweat. Without a single thought for the consequences, I sucked in a deep breath and bellowed with every ounce of force my lungs could muster. Enough! As the sound echoed in the sudden, shocked silence, I heaved the bucket forward, sending 5 gallons of ice-cold water cascading over the two of them. They both screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated shock this time. As they sputtered and gasped, I looked them straight in the eye and said in a perfectly calm voice, "We have neighbors." Then, before either of their brains could fully process what had just happened, I turned on my heel, walked back to my room, and threw the deadbolt. A few seconds later, the pounding started. Cassandra was screaming at my door, a string of curses and threats that would make a sailor blush. I leaned against the solid wood, a huge, uncontrollable grin spreading across my face. I started to chuckle, then laugh, a deep, cathartic laugh that shook my whole body. I was so happy I had kept my old, sturdy door. When it became clear I wasn't opening up and she couldn't break it down, the pounding stopped. I heard them stomping around, gathering their things with angry mutters. Then the front door slammed shut, and the house fell into a profound, beautiful silence. I went back to bed, still giggling, and slept more soundly than I had in weeks. When I got home from work the next evening, all of Cassandra's belongings were gone. On the kitchen table was her key and a very nasty note, calling me several creative names and stating that she refused to live with someone who thought my actions were acceptable. I crumpled up the note and tossed it in the trash. The peace in my duplex was restored. The air felt lighter. I spent the weekend cleaning her empty room, airing it out, reclaiming my space completely. Weeks later, I ran into Leo at a coffee shop. He clapped me on the shoulder, laughing. "I heard what you did," he said. "The story is legendary. You're the water bucket avenger." He told me that Cassandra had moved in with the skinny guy from that night. And ever since their baptism by bucket, whenever they get together, not a single peep can be heard from their room. It turned out my revenge did more than just get her out of my house. It apparently taught her a lesson in consideration that a dozen landlords never could. Some people, I guess, just have to learn things the wet way.